Hi there, my name's Matthew, and welcome to the reading activities for the Fluency Development Strand. Okay, so we're looking at two activities. One is called speed reading, and the other is called repeated reading. So here is our big chart of the four strands. So we're looking here at reading, and we have two activities to look at. So, just like the fluency development video for listening, I'm going to briefly tell you about fluency with reading. So, again, this is about receiving messages. So, we're receiving communication in the form of a written text. So, we're reading. Um, so, we're able to process information without effort. That means that when we do fluency reading, we should either be familiar with the text, and the text should have no new words, or the text should be extremely easy for us, and we're pushing to process that information faster. So, um, if you are a fluent reader, that means that you're not just involved with understanding and figuring out the text, but you're also anticipating what's coming next. If you see a word or phrase, then your brain is just anticipating what will come next. So, for example, if you looked at these sentences here, um, you would probably you would connect this with real world information, and you would expect there to be something negative that I come home to. So I left the children with a babysitter and I came home to a complete mess or a complete disaster or something along those lines. So that's what a fluent reader does. Fluent reader is not just adding one word at a time and processing meaning like that. A fluent reader is anticipating what's coming next and processing the text effortlessly and probably going much faster. So a native speaker usually reads 250, upwards of 350 words a minute in English. So most beginner readers in English are reading around 100 words a minute. After doing a speed reading course, that can be upwards of 200 words. So that's much closer to what a native speaker does at 250 words a minute. So we need to practice fluency with reading because this is going to improve the reading that we do in the other strands, particularly with meaning focused input, so using extensive reading. So the faster we are at reading, the faster we can work with meaning focused input, so extensive reading, which means the more language, the more vocabulary, the more text we are going to cover within that amount of time. That means the faster we will learn. So this is a really important um, skill for fluency development. So, in order to practice fluency with reading, we can, just the same as with listening, we can read the same content over and over, of course, pushing for speed, and we will have all these words should be known, and we will see those words in the same context and same phrases. So we'll become more familiar with those the uses of those words in those phrases. Or, the same as listening, we could get extremely easy content for our level and uh, read that, but push for speed. So that means we will see words that we know, but in different phrases. So we're going to learn from that input, and it's going to be fast, as in we'll be practicing our fluency and we will be doing some implicit language learning as well. So, the third way of developing fluency with reading is to follow a formal speed reading program. If you can get one, English is a privileged language, of course, because most of the uh, work in this area has been done using English, so you can find a free speed reading course on Paul Nation's website. And so in the details of this video, you will see a link to Paul Nation's website. Just go there and scroll down, and I believe you'll find a speed reading course, and you'll find content on Sonia Millett's page as well. There are links on Paul Nation's website for that. Okay, so let's look at speed reading and repeated reading in more detail. So with speed reading, we're using easy material, and we're pushing to go faster. So we're making ourselves read as fast as we can. Now, with speed reading, especially if it's part of a course, there are usually comprehension questions to answer afterwards. So you need to be focused on the meaning and understanding of that text, but you're pushing to go fast as you can, and still understand what you're reading. That's why the material needs to be really easy for your level. It can't be difficult. It needs to be well within your range. Now, repeated reading is exactly the same as speed reading, except you've read the text before. So you need to make sure that with repeated reading or speed reading, you need to make sure that both activities have no new language features. And you need to make sure that it's well within your range if you're a student, or if you're teaching learners, then you need to make sure it's within their range. And you can use text from the other strands. That means the meaning focus input strand, you use text. So if you used a graded reader with extensive reading, you can reread a book. So rereading books is very good for you. You just read it and you push for speed, and you're already familiar with it. So it's really helping you anticipate what comes next as well. You can also use text from intensive reading. So the intensive reading activity from the language-focused learning strand, well, the more you read over that, the more it will be familiar to you. And then the more effective it is for fluency reading. Now, fluency with reading, as in speed reading or repeated reading, it's probably better to use text from the extensive reading, because they're longer and you can sustain it longer. With intensive reading, you would read the same text, but it might not be that long, so you might not be able to use it that much in one sitting. If you're starting off learning, then you will have to use intensive readings. So there might be a short text in the course book that you have, and then you read that. Uh, you use it first with intensive reading, and then you're really familiar with the text now. You read it several times for repeated reading, and you might have to do that until you get enough vocabulary to tackle and start working with graded readers. Or if you're learning a language that does not have graded readers, then extensive reading can be difficult for you uh, to use. So you might have to use intensive readings to practice fluency. Now, if you compare fluency reading, as in speed reading and repeated reading, to the other strands with reading, so how much time? So for example, if you do a total of 2 hours a week of extensive reading, that means that you have 2 other hours in the week where 1 hour is for intensive reading and 1 hour is for speed reading. So reading back over that extensive reading that you did. We're just talking about reading. You'd have to balance out the other strands as well. So for example, if you spend 2 hours in meaning focused input with reading, so that means 2 hours is also spent with listening. So that's 4 hours here, which means your total course load would be 4 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours, 4 hours, so 16 hours a week. So if you're trying to figure out how much time you have for each activity, go to the video on planning a scheme of work. Okay, let's imagine that you are a language teacher and you want to do a formal speed reading course. Um, so a formal speed reading course usually has a series of very easy texts for your students, and it probably has about 20 texts. So you could print out all 20 of those texts. Students can read different texts at the same time, as in one student will read text one, and that's the only student reading text one. The other students are reading the other text of the 20. And then in the next reading session, they change papers around. So the student who was reading text one before is now reading text five, for example. So that would be good. So 20 text for 20 different sittings. So you spend about 5 minutes doing this activity 3 times a week, and this lasts for about 7 weeks. So reading speeds usually go from about 100 words to 200 words in a minute. And this is a significant increase in reading speed, by the way, because 250 to 300, 350 is what native speakers do. So this is how the teacher does it. So ideally, you'll have a timer on the projector. There are other ways to do this if you don't have a timer. So project 5 minutes on the board, and it counts. It counts up from 0 to 5 minutes. So when the teacher says go, the students start reading their text and they try to go as fast as they can. There are comprehension questions though at the end. So when a student finishes reading, they look up, take a note of the time, and then they flip over the reading. So they answer some questions about the reading without looking back at the text. The speed, as in the time, how much time it took them to read, they note that on a graph. Students will note down their reading speed, as in how much time it took them to finish reading, and this will indicate progress over time. Okay, so I'm just going to assume that you are learning a language on your own and it's not English because you're able to listen to this video. So what do you do? Whatever you're using in the other strands for reading, you simply do repeated reading with that, which means you need to cover a good bit of content in the other strands so that you can practice repeated reading with a variety of different materials so you don't get bored with the same texts.